So today we have the pleasure and privilege of having Father Dave from Sydney, Australia with us. I followed Dave on social media for a number of years, especially many years ago when I first began my research into dispensationalism and Christian Zionism, and discovered him through another friend. Dave's involved with many different things over the years. He's going to share his background and how he got into working with young people and how his boxing played very much a part in that. And he's still working now with young people. Dave's also author of a number of books, and I'll put the links to them in the description. So let's have a conversation with Father Dave. Okay. So Dave, it's a real joy to have you with us today. Could you tell us a bit about your background in your childhood and how you came to faith in Jesus Christ?
Sure, champ. Look, I've always lived here in the inner west of Sydney. Um, my dad was a priest, an Anglican priest. So, I was brought up in a very Christian household. But I think I went off the tracks a bit, as many do, when I was a teenager. And I think that was exacerbated by my mother died when I was 16. And yeah, she died quite a slow and painful death. And that was I sort of went way off track after that and got
Right.
involved. That was the height of the punk rock movement. And that was very much my culture at the time.
Okay.
And yeah, there was a strong sort of gang culture, and it was yeah, it was nothing. There's nothing to be proud of in that. But yeah, thanks be to God, I came out of that, and again, that was obviously the influence of my father, who after my
Okay.
mother died, we went to live with. And he's a great man. And yeah, really, it brought me to a point of realizing that God was still interested in my life. But I was doing some things which involved in some relatively pretty nasty stuff, and but I couldn't escape the fact that I knew what I was doing was wrong, which was a reminder
Mm.
that God was still there, still interested in the way I was living. And I think eventually I reached the point of just praying and letting go and handing things over.
Mm.
And I remember waking up feeling different. And not long after that, I sort of stopped carrying a knife around and
All right.
stopped wearing the studs and, uh, you know, gradually disarmed.
Okay. Yes, disarmed before God. Yeah.
Yeah, and from there it was I decided early on in prayer that I needed to give my life to the Christian ministry in one form or another, and I sort of went straight from there to studying and first at university, finishing school, and then at university, and then at seminary. And I've been a priest since 1989, so
Okay.
seems like a while now. But yeah, a lot of my energy over those years has been devoted to working with, well, young men in particular who are in similar situations to what I was when I was a teenager. I always used to say I've never met anyone worse than I was. I think that's
Yes.
true.
But
I think that's
I,
true.
I guess with that, you had experienced, at least in a measure, what they were going through.
Look, I think, but this is why the boxing's worked so well for me.
Mm.
Young men take up boxing as a sport because they're angry. No one. If life's going well, you take up something else, table tennis. People come in wanting to box because either they got enemies or they're angry, and generally both, or other issues. From back in 1990, we were the heroin capital of the inner west in the parish I was in, and we started to get off the gear, get into the ring program, which is gear, meaning heroin, and it just it, we saw so much success
Yeah,
with that
I was going to
program,
ask you that. What sort of, not that we want to talk about statistics in particular, because God is bigger than that, and people can come to the Lord even if they mess up again. God's grace is so immense that we can never get away from it. But how many sort of percentage, if you don't mind me asking,
Not at all.
success rate did you experience, say, in the first 5 years of that
Oh, look,
program?
I think I can say with honesty, we never had anyone who took up our boxing program that wasn't helped by it. I used to say we had a 100% success rate in the sense that those who went as far as taking an amateur fight, for instance, by the
Mm-hmm.
time they got there, they weren't doing drugs, they weren't in trouble with the law,
Wow.
they were back at school. 100%. Not everyone got that far. You know,
So,
Often the pull of the peer group was too much, but that was really one of the most powerful things I think that we offer. If you look at a boxing club, there's a format there which is just not repeated in the rest of society anymore. We've got older, responsible men looking after younger men.
mm,
You know,
yes, I
in
agree.
a very
Very
mentoring
rare
sort of way.
today.
Working in
Mm,
their corner, being there to support them. They've got to do the work, but you're there behind them, advising,
yes,
supporting. It goes back to that mentoring role which we saw adult men play for younger men in traditional societies, I think. And I think
yes,
it almost becomes their first fight becomes almost a ritual coming of age.
yes,
I
yes,
always say to their dads and that, if we could give them the car keys after they've had their first fight, it was now you've learned to control your power. You know what I mean? Now you've learned
yes,
self-discipline,
yes,
now you can be trusted with the car keys. I think we'd see a lot less deaths on the road if that were the case.
I'm
So
sure.
yeah, it's not really about hitting each other. It's about establishing relationships of mentoring. It's about establishing a community and relationships that
Yes.
move a young person beyond the peer group. And it's also about learning self-control.
So do you have some of those young people, and I'm assuming it was mostly young men by what you're
Nine
saying.
out of 10.
So you've also had girls come through the program?
Oh, yes. I mean, I've got three daughters.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I'd say I'd love to be doing more, and a couple of my girls box with me, but, nothing too serious.
No, no,
And
no.
look, when I say nothing too serious, a lot of the guys, I've never had any of my guys become, world champion or anything. On the contrary, a lot of them, when they deal with their issues, they lose interest in fighting.
Yes.
I had one boy I remember who he'd had three straight wins, kickboxing it was, and he knocking him out, very powerful young. He come in with a heroin problem. His
Right.
dad got him to me, and he's had three straight wins, and he says, Dave, I don't think God wants me to hurt people anymore. And I'm saying, oh yeah, look, he does, get back in there. But
I
look, that
guess,
guy, he's still working as a youth worker now with a church.
oh, that's
That's was 20
lovely.
years
So
ago at
that's in
least.
your congregation?
Sorry?
Is he in your congregation?
Yeah, he was after that. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, he became part
So,
of things, and then he's been working in the church for many, many years now. I mean, yeah, I guess that's an obvious success story. They're not all great success stories like that, some die.
no.
Some
Well, we're,
overdose.
we're, we're not all great success stories ourselves, are we, really? In many
That's a
ways.
fair point, brother. Fair
Yes.
point.
And
Look,
I think the more we discover about ourselves in our relationship with God, the more we realize really that, I mean, I came from a background of not heavy drugs, but I was in the hippie movement, so I got some idea of those things, but we were flower power. We weren't into aggression.
yeah, yeah. I just missed that phase of the flower power on the way out and the punk movement on the way in. So I caught the
Yes,
wrong wave, didn't I?
yes. So, so when did you actually start the project with young people? I mean, what was your main motivation as well for doing that?
For starting the boxing program
Mm,
specifically?
yes.
Look, it was just a question of the area we were in. I mean, I'd had kept up my, I got out of all those forms of fighting after my conversion initially, but later got back into it for health reasons, just into the martial arts.
Right.
But when
Okay.
I moved into this area, which was the heroin capital of the region of Sydney,
Wow.
uh, we had to find some way of connecting with the young people. It just wasn't safe, that area. You'd never see young people come out at night. It was just there were a number of gangs operating in the area, and I remember the year I got there that someone had confiscated a gun from someone in the school. I mean, in this country, that
Wow.
stuff just doesn't happen. Um,
Yes.
but I remember at one point we had three people in our congregation who had been shot, and I thought that's got to be a record in Sydney where we just don't
Wow.
have gun crime. You know, it's not Chicago. But
Yes.
yeah, it was a very, very rough area, and I thought the boxing, well, initially martial arts and boxing was a way of just connecting with the kids in the area. Yeah.
Because one gets the idea, you got the opera house there, haven't you? And so, and you got the bridge and the harbor, and that's all people see outside of Australia, what Sydney is, and all the big expensive houses on the front there.
Yeah,
But
and
but that the area that you're talking about and the environment, the culture is just not seen, is it?
look, I was parish priest in that area for 30 years, and over that time we saw the housing prices quadruple because it's too close to Sydney and it all got gentrified, and all those problems went away. And I probably should have left at that point um, uh, because the problems didn't get solved, they got pushed further out west. I mean, having said that, I'd like to think we made a real contribution to ending a lot of
I'm
the
sure you did, brother. Yeah.
well, I think we did. I think we made a real contribution, but we didn't solve the problem. The problem moved further out west in
Mm,
Sydney as the housing prices went up and people couldn't afford to live in this area anymore. So, and I shifted focus then too in our ministry as well. That's when I started doing the Boxes for Peace program, where we started
okay.
going over to Syria, and things like
Yes.
that. We also
So,
started all into faith work, working with the local Muslim community and trying to build bridges there. This was after 9/11, and
mhm. Wow.
so a lot of the focus of the mission shifted. But we continued
So,
to run the youth center. We ran the youth drop-in for 25 years, and it was a good work. And we continue to run the boxing club because the boxing club even had broader appeal. I think just again keeping that mentoring process, bringing younger men and older men together in a positive way. I know and even within the church that's been sexualized and abused, and there's a
yes.
terrible history of abuse. But when it's done in a positive way, when you've got adult men trying to mentor younger men in a positive, non-sexual way, I think it's a very
Yes.
powerful thing.
You've been involved with prison work?
Oh, I used to teach wrestling at one of the juvenile
Wow.
detention centers, one of the juvenile prisons. I remember it was fantastic. I used to go there every fortnight and just teach them to wrestle. And I wasn't going to teach them to box. And some of these boys, they're under 18, but some of them are huge. you know. And I remember every time I get some guy be doing his best to break my neck, and then you'd spin him round and you'd put him on his back and you'd be in a position where you could hurt him. But then instead of hurting him, you'd say, okay, you don't want to do that. You turn the other way or you know, and I worked out eventually that most of these guys had only ever associated authority with abuse.
Wow.
That they're used to the person who, if
Yes.
they get in a commanding position on them, is going to damage them. And
Mm,
once we broke that connection, once I say, okay, now I'm in a position where I could break your arm if I wanted to. But of course, I don't want to do that. I want to show you how to, don't do that. Turn the other way next time. And we built relationships of trust so quickly. And I'd have guys afterwards saying, "Oh, it reminds me when I was little. We wrestled with my dad. All this good stuff would come up. And I used to say to the staff there, look, we seem to be able to build relationships of trust here in a few minutes, which has taken some of you guys many months.
yes. Yes.
I think for men, that physical, tangible touching in a positive, masculine,
Yes.
non-sexual way
Yes.
is as we do in sport all the time, is a fantastic way of developing trust.
Yes.
But you've got to be very, uh, you've got to do it in the right way, obviously.
Mm.
Um,
I was looking when I was reading. I mean, you've got quite a bit of information out there on the internet, and I'll probably put some links
Thank
uh,
you.
in the intro, on the video later on. But I was thinking when I was in school, I was totally non-sport.
Yeah.
The only sport and then when I grew up, because I didn't want to get hurt. And the only sport I was interested in when I really started growing up before I joined the armed forces, which was back in the mid 60s, the only game I enjoyed was playing snooker. So I've you know so I've got no personal experience apart from doing judo for a little while, which I enjoyed. But I think
Which is
I
the
thought,
roughest. I've been more injured doing judo than any other form of fighting art.
but I felt this is not for me. I don't like getting hurt.
It's very rough sport.
If it's
I
done properly, yes.
had my legs snapped in two places
Wow.
in a
Wow.
judo throw. Worst injury I ever had.
Wow.
I have had two knees done in kickboxing, two knee operations, but the worst was the judo. Boxing, I mean, I've had a brain hemorrhage, but apart from that,
Yes.
it sounds terrible actually like this, doesn't it? But
It does,
the truth
doesn't
is,
it?
it's
Because a
worth it.
lot a lot of people don't survive from that, and if they do, it usually affects them for life, or can do.
Yeah. Oh, look, for sure. And look, I know the next big hit I get will be my last one.
Right.
That I'm convinced that the good Lord wants me to keep going at the moment.
You better keep
I'm,
ducking
I,
then, Dave. We call you Ducking Dave instead of Father Dave.
yeah, yeah. Look, I'm very good at making people miss. That's what I do. That's my great skill. I'm not a big hitter, but I'm good at making people miss.
Right. Well, that's important, isn't
I think it's the key.
it? Absolutely. Yes.
Mm, mm.
Yeah, my dad used to box in the Navy,
Okay.
but
Oh, armed
he
forces, they're quite rough.
but my dad never disciplined us physically. It was always my mother.
Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah, but they weren't Christians until much later in life, and they both came to the Lord after I did.
Oh,
But
thanks
my
be to God.
my dad wouldn't touch us.
Interesting, isn't it? Some of the most excellent boxers I know are some of the gentlest men I know as well. You
Mm,
know, I think often the violent people, they've got things to prove to themselves and to others. Who knows what forces are driving.
yes, yes. But
Mm.
you've obviously learned a lot of wisdom through. No, it's clear that you have through what you've been involved with, especially what you just said is quite striking to me. That some people don't get involved because not because they couldn't handle themselves, but because they don't need to.
I mean, I suppose I didn't need to, but if I wanted to make a difference, yeah, I had to do something,
Yes.
And
Oh, in that respect, yes.
yeah,
So you
I,
said you went out to Syria, was it, or
yeah.
Palestine? Syria?
9 times we made 9 trips to Syria during the worst of the violence there. I've been also, I think, 5 trips to Iran now, and yeah, I made it once as far as Israel, but yeah, that was they got rid of me as quickly as they could, so
Yes.
they got rid of me before I could get there.
So you didn't even get in. They had a file on you, no doubt.
They did have a file on me. I got into Jerusalem there. It was to support my friend Morty Vanunu, if you're familiar with Morty.
Yes, yeah. Maybe you could touch on that. You mentioned to me in an email, I think, that
Yeah,
he came onto the parish ground.
yeah. Look, I was working in King's Cross at that time. King's Cross was very much the red light district of Sydney. We were at a church there, right in the middle of all of that, and I was running a Friday night, just sort of open church offering coffee and tea to people, really nothing
Okay.
spectacular. But we were particularly trying to target young people on the wall, as it was called. There were a lot of young people's prostitutes. And we're
Okay.
talking 13, 14 years old here. We're not even,
Wow.
you know, oh, I mean, that's the youngest, but older as well, of course. But so many young kids. And anyway, so we set up this just keeping an open thing there, and people could come in and talk to us, and they did, and it was great. And then also this young Jewish backpacker walks in. Well, I say
So,
he's young, he would have been close to 30. And
yeah.
it was Morty Vanunu. And
Mm.
I remember showing him around the church, and then we got talking, we became friends. Turned out we'd both been studying philosophy in a similar area, and we became the best of friends, and he started then doing Bible studies with me,
All
and
right.
that's when and he started talking about what his story and what it turned out the reason he was really there was he'd taken these photos of the Dimona nuclear reactor where he worked, and he'd snuck a camera in and snuck it out
Mm.
and taken
Mm.
all these photographs of Israel developing the neutron bomb and all this sort of stuff, and he was struggling within himself as what he was going to do
Yes.
with these photographs.
What he should
And
do. Yeah.
yes, he was struggling with what he should do. And he said to me, if I share these photos, my family will disown me, the Mossad will track me down and kill me. And yeah, I was young, I was in my 20s. Didn't have a clue what he was getting into. I look back now and
Mm.
think, if only I'd known what I know now, I would have stayed with him when he went to London to verify the story. But he was
Yes.
kidnapped there. Well, he was kidnapped technically in Paris. They
Yes.
they
It's a
wouldn't do
honey
it in
trap.
London. They got into
It's a
Paris and
honey
kidnapped
trap, I
him from
think,
there.
wasn't it?
Sorry?
I say it was a honey trap, I think.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. A girl
Yeah.
called Cindy Bentoff, Mossad agent, um, pretending to be an American beautician, picked him
Yeah.
up in London and then
Because
got him as far as Paris, where they knocked him on the head, drugged him up, put him in the back of a cargo ship, and sent him back to Israel for trial. He gave his story, he never got paid for it, to the
okay.
Sunday Times.
It's
The
okay.
complicating fact there is that the guy who latched onto him in Sydney, who claimed to be an international journalist, who we later found out was international con man, uh, when they got to London together, he tried to sell the story first at the Sunday Times. When they wouldn't take it, he sold to the Sunday Mirror, I think it was, or Daily Mirror, and they produced a story, about nuclear con man. Because they didn't take the story seriously, but did give this other guy Oscar some money. That's where it became dirty, and it was when they published that story in the Mirror and Morty's face was on the front of that. That's when he panicked and tried to get out
Mm.
of London, and that's what led to his
Yeah.
abduction and
Not very
trial
well.
and
He wasn't very
imprisonment.
wise, clearly.
No, and this is why if I just look back and think if only I'd gone with him, I didn't
Mm.
understand what he was getting into. I mean,
No, no.
God knows what would I would have probably just quietly disappeared and been found at
Yes,
the
he
bottom
might
of the
well
Thames. I
well
don't
done.
know.
Yes.
But yeah, and Morty spent 11 and a half years in solitary, which is the longest any human being on record has spent in solitary.
Wow.
So, and I published a book of letters we wrote to each other over that time, where you gradually see him losing his grip. And uh, anyway, I was with him when he got on the day he got released after 18 years, as I promised every letter to him I would be. And I almost got killed that day myself. I came that
Oh.
close. I'll never know how I survived. It was a riot. It was the first and last riot I've ever been involved in. But
I have read the book, so I do know, the skeleton story, if
yeah,
you like, but not the meat.
The thing I always remember is going to church at the end of that at St. George's Cathedral there, over morning tea afterwards, after being there for a week. The guy saying to me, "You know that part in the Bible where it says the Spirit of God got up and left Jerusalem?" I said, "Yeah, it's in the book of Ezekiel." He said, "It's a lot like that here, isn't it?"
Well, absolutely.
Yeah, it's a lot like that. It's still a lot like that. I know that it's often taken as being anti-Semitic if you're an anti-Zionist, but most of the most ardent supporters of Palestine I've worked with, like Morty, like Miko Peled or Anthony Lowenstein in this country, they're all Jewish.
Yes, exactly. Well, this is it.
Beautiful, beautiful, powerful, courageous men,
Yes, yes.
um, who've taken a stand and are often vilified. because of that, as we all can be.
So
But
there
yeah,
was an author who wrote a lot about this subject. Pepe, someone?
oh, Ilan Pape.
Yes,
Yes,
Ilan
he's
Pape.
a yeah, Israeli journalist and writer. Very good.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. Israeli activists, and they pay the price. I remember when
Well,
we were in there.
exactly.
In there, I would come and stay for a week. I'd be abused and all that, but then I get to go home. And these people, they'd be there all the time,
Yeah,
protesting, doing their thing,
yeah.
being spat on, paying the price. So many courageous young Jewish people we were working with there who are standing up, for truth. It
Mm.
was so admirable. So, God bless them, God strengthen them.
So when we consider the situation now in Syria, where it's practically being taken over,
Yeah.
what's your take on the situation with Iran, if you don't mind going down that route?
Yeah, no, I'm very happy to go down there. As I say, I visited Iran a number of times now, initially through connections with the work in Syria. A lot of young Iranian university students who are very much trying to help the Syrian people just at a welfare level, helping. We were taking over food and clothes and other things. This is, back in the early, 2014, I think. But yeah, so I've stayed in contact there and have many friends down Iran, and I've been over there twice. They've flown me over there to be on Iranian TV, which has been
All right.
fun. Yeah,
Okay.
I was on a big live show about the Quran there recently. I thought, why do you want me? But it was great. Loved it.
Because
Yeah,
it's not about symbolism in the end of the day, is it? It's about a person's heart and
yeah, yeah, yeah. Look, that's been a different path of discovery for me.
mm,
I've certainly my early years as a Christian thought, really feeling the Spirit of God only moved amongst people, not just of proper Christians, but really people in my denomination. And then you find the Spirit of God operating in the last places you expected.
exactly. I think
You know,
when we all get older, it's certainly been something. That's one of the reasons I've started this channel, really. Uh, we start to understand things gradually, and God opens up our understanding, and we move away from many of the initial things, but don't depart from them, but gets broader and broader our understanding and hopefully our wisdom. And we start to appreciate how great God is and how great his grace and love is. And I think as younger Christians, that was very narrow
yeah.
because we only knew him in part, and we still only know him in part.
Look, I think it's all in John 3. I keep coming back to that. Jesus says the wind blows where it will, and so it is with the Spirit. You know,
I
you
agree.
know where it's come from or where it's blowing next, but you can't miss it when it's blowing.
No.
And I did not expect to find the Spirit of God at work going through the Grand Mufti of Syria, for instance. And then, uh, but there was no mistaking.
Mm.
And, I found the Spirit of God the last places I expect. In prisons, and you find, wow, okay, God still got a lot to teach me.
Yes, well, I believe you're absolutely right there. I
Mm.
mean,
I think this is it. You don't know when it's come from or where it's going next, but you can't mistake the Spirit of God when it's blowing. And neither should we. I think if you think of when Jesus speaks of the committing the unforgivable sin, it's the person who fails to recognize the Spirit of God, who refuses to recognize the Spirit of God. Remember, if I by the Spirit of God cast out demons, know the Spirit of God has come upon, kingdom of God has come
the
upon
kingdom of
you.
God.
And
Yes.
it's these people who say, oh, we pass out demons by the prince of demons. And they're the ones who says, you sin against the Spirit, you can't recognize the Spirit of God at work, you're in real trouble.
Mm.
So I think when we see the Spirit of God, we've got to give thanks and recognize it, whether it's coming, whether the Spirit of God is working through the channels we expect.
I think there's a great danger in any way limiting God. And we'd be very foolish, wouldn't we? I mean, we look back at history and there's so many ways that God has moved, not only in revival, but in many invisible things that we've never seen, but we've heard of and know of in all cultures.
Yeah, look, we constantly tend towards tribalism, I think. Assuming God will only work through our tribe.
Yeah, yeah, I guess
But
so. It's one way of putting it.
well, I think tribalism is the heart of it. You know what I see Jesus saying to us, particularly the parable of the Good Samaritan. Who is my neighbor? Well, my fellow
Absolutely.
Jew. My fellow Jew, the obvious
And,
answer.
and
But
that's and that's the second great commandment.
yeah,
To love your
yeah,
neighbor. He
do this
says,
and you will live.
who is my neighbor? And then when he says, it's a Samaritan.
Well, it's interesting. You mentioned you know my friend Stephen Sizer, and Stephen
Yes,
was the one we were in Tehran, and he was the one that pointed out to me. He grabbed me out to tell me about the Good Samaritan. Obviously, moving the spirit of God in his part because I've never forgotten that. He said, Dave, you know why they walked by on the other side, the Pharisee and the scribe. I said, well, I don't know. You know, did they have to get to a synagogue sermon or something? You know, we always, preachers, we tend to eulogize over this. Why did the scribe and the Pharisee pass by on the other side? He said, Jesus told us why. He said, the man was left naked and unconscious. They couldn't tell whether he was one
well,
of us or one of them. He can't tell whether
absolutely.
he's a
Yeah,
Jew or a Samaritan or a
absolutely.
Roman because the way you tell is by the way they dress and by their accent. And he's
Mm,
naked and unconscious. So he doesn't know
yeah,
if he's a fellow Jew.
yeah,
And that's why
absolutely
they don't
right.
want to touch him.
Dave.
Because if he's not one of us, he's not my problem.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So they couldn't know his who he was, where he came from. No, I agree totally. And I remember someone sharing that many years ago, in a message.
Yeah, look, it was
That
a
that
real
is a
breakthrough
very,
insight for
very
me.
important thing to understand and to live by.
Look, it's moving beyond us and them. I think that's the
Yeah,
key thing. And that's
absolutely.
when they asked Jesus, you know, well, who is my neighbor? Who is
Mm,
us? Who is them?
mm,
And Jesus changes it around, doesn't he? He really asks, what sort of neighbor are you?
yes. So
Who acted as a neighbor in that situation?
that is
It
the
didn't seem to
heart.
matter.
That's the heart of God, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think it's a great shift from, you know, I was working with a guy in Tehran recently, a sheikh there once wrote a book on the concept of neighbor in both the New Testament and in the Quran. And I said, in the New Testament, I said it's one of the most fundamental terms in the entire Bible because it marks a shift between what we call the Old Testament, the covenant with Abram and his descendants, and the New Testament, where it broadens out where the covenant is with all of us, who
Absolutely.
all persons in faith through
Mm,
Christ,
yes.
and yeah, where it's no longer sort of
This
ethnocentric,
is,
where neighbour
I,
means all of us now.
I
Who is
think
my
what we're thinking of here, and I think we've been led here, I really do, that this is it, isn't it? It's discovering that God is no respecter of persons.
exactly, exactly.
As Peter said when he went to speak to Cornelius and they received the Holy Spirit as he was preaching, and he said, I perceive that God is no respecter of persons. And I wonder if the Christian church has really learned that.
I think we keep collapsing back into tribalism of one form or another.
Mm.
It's no longer
This
my
is,
fellow Jew, it'll be my fellow Protestant or my fellow Catholic or my fellow, you know,
and we all have a history, and sometimes we can bring our history uh, to our faith in a wrong way.
it's the
You know,
very thing Jesus was urging us to move beyond
yeah,
in the
yeah.
parable of the Good
This,
Samaritan. Who is my neighbor?
yeah,
Who is us? Who is them? There's no
yes.
us and them. It's just us.
And
Just us.
I think when we understand that, it breaks the eggshell.
No, totally. I think everything else starts to fall into place once we grasp that. And
Yes.
you know, it is the great shift from the Old to New Testament. It's the essence.
Well, absolutely. I agree. But you know, unfortunately, and this is a subject that I'm not grappling with, but understanding more and more and more. And you said you didn't really know much about the eschatology and and dispensational, but it's something that I've discovered more and more is at the root of the problem. In that the man who developed dispensational is he made a divide between the Jews and the church, and that is at the root of the problem.
Well, this is it, and this is why I've never been able to get interested in it because it just seems to me it just goes wrong right at the beginning. So
Well,
I,
absolutely.
I can't get
But
interested in it.
but there are millions of American
Yeah,
Christians, evangelical
yeah.
Christians, that have fallen for this deception.
We need someone who's been down that terrible path, perhaps
Well,
yourself. To,
well, I'm thankfully the Lord has enabled me to speak. I'm speaking with a brother later on today, well tonight, because he's in America, who was wrapped up in that for years and years and years.
yeah.
And the Lord showed him. He had, and obviously he'll tell his own story tonight, so I'll leave it to him to do that. But others who've been involved with this root of the problem, dispensationalism.
It's very insidious because it forces you to make a shipwreck of your conscience, if I can use James's phrase.
Right, go on. Explain what you mean by that.
Well, you have to abandon your morality for the sake of prophecy. You know, you have a particular view of, oh, God's predicting all these things are going to happen, and therefore we need to do this, this, and this. Whereas prophecy, you know, what I realized many years ago, as I was taught to, prophecy never functions that way. Prophecy functions as a form of shock therapy. If you think of like the 8th century prophets in the Torah, you know, Amos, Micah, people like that,
Hmm.
they give, well, I think the best example probably Jonah. When Jonah
Okay.
says Nineveh is going to be destroyed in 40 days, that's not a call to then take up arms against Nineveh, is it?
No, exactly.
You don't therefore get your torch and go and start setting fire to things in Nineveh, do you? That's not the point. He gives that prophecy to try and shock the people of Nineveh into repentance.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, so yeah, the message of doom is meant to be a tool to do the right thing before God. And
Absolutely.
yet
I
and
agree.
yet some will say, oh, it says here in the book of Daniel or Revelation that, you know, the Jews in of 21st century are going to conquer the Palestinians and do all this. Therefore, we should be backing the Jews. I say, look, I don't think it does say that. The point of prophecy is just to shock you into doing the right thing.
I agree. Yeah.
And you get that from the commandments, not from the
Yes.
prophecy.
Yes.
You do justice, you love mercy, you walk humbly, you do these things. And the rights and wrongs in this situation are very straightforward. Anyone who can look at the moment of what's going on in Gaza and think that somehow God's endorsing that has seriously made a shipwreck of their conscience.
Absolutely.
That
I agree. I
you've
couldn't
lost all
agree
moral
more.
sense.
And this is one of the reasons I'm pursuing this channel is to, if I can, if the Lord can, through this, educate people to what the root of the and how they've been misled, and they develop this theology which is totally unscriptural. And some of the people I'm hoping to come on. I mean, I don't want to speak for other people, so I don't want to do that. But they'll have their own opportunities, I hope. But it's a major problem. Some people are seeing now, because of the atrocities that have been happening in the Middle East, not just in Gaza but elsewhere, are starting to question how could God allow this to
Yeah,
happen?
yeah,
You know, because they developed all this stuff that came from J.N. Darby about the rapture and how God's going to take us away and 7 year tribulation and all this stuff. And they're just so being so wrapped up in it. But I think their conscience is being pricked when they see what's going on in the Middle East. And they're thinking, how can this really be of God? And many people are leaving it, that
I hope so.
dispensational system. No, and
I
churches,
hope
yeah.
so.
Oh, it's true. It's happening. Many, many, many American people. Yes.
Nineveh is going to fall is not a reason to attack Nineveh. Israel is going to be destroyed is not a reason to pitch in and destroy Israel.
No, okay, I agree.
In any of the prophets. I mean,
Yes.
none of the prophets prophesied the doom of Israel hoping that it would fall. On the contrary, the point was to
Well,
repent so that it
exactly.
didn't happen.
Look at Jesus. He said, "Oh
Yeah,
Jerusalem,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
his
If only you
heart
knew
was
the things that made for
broken."
peace. That's right. I mean, he
Yeah.
prophesied the fall of Jerusalem as well. Doesn't mean he wants it to happen. Doesn't mean it should have happened. If only we could have
No,
stopped it. Jesus wept,
exactly.
saying that
Yeah.
that it could be stopped.
Yes. If they
Uh,
repented,
yeah, and
and if
that's all. That's what we need to do. We need to repent.
yes, I agree.
And I mean, we need to repent of the power mongering that's going on at the moment, the arrogance, the violence,
Yes.
the lies. And I mean, the depth of all of that is coming out at the moment. I think the links now that are coming out between some of these warmongers and some of the terrible activities associated with the Epstein files,
Hmm.
mixtures now are coming together of not, of violence and pedophilia and uh, cannibalism, all sorts of things. The
So they
most
say.
horrific
Yes.
combination of violence.
Yes. But will anyone be held accountable?
That is the question, of course. Look, I think I do think that yeah, the British people, the American people, that they'll forgive their presidents, prime ministers for the murder of countless numbers of Arabic people, black people, Muslims, whatever. But I don't think they'll forgive them for molesting young children.
Yeah. Well, let's
I
see
don't
how
think they
that
will. I don't
develops.
think the American people will forgive their president if that comes to be shown to
Mm,
be true
mm,
without doubt. I don't think they will forgive him for molesting young children.
no.
And I don't think the British people will if it comes out
Well,
that,
yes, I think no, I think once these things are exposed, there is a great anger in people, and a disappointment.
yeah, disillusionment,
Mm.
not with just with the individuals, but the very institutions,
Well,
which gives,
exactly. Yes, exactly.
and I don't know what we do about that. What happens the day after, I don't know, but
Well, we've
we
just
need
got
to turn
to
out.
trust that God is over
Yeah,
all. I
yeah,
mean, if we
yeah,
don't believe that, we may also throw in the towel, aren't we, straight away?
absolutely right. Absolutely right. Yeah,
He knows. I mean, we can think of terrible things like that happened with Pol Pot and others, and we can say, "Where's God?" And what's going
yeah,
on in Gaza, we can say, "Where's God?"
yeah,
But I
yeah,
think I think that's because we don't really know Him. I'm not being arrogant by saying that, because if we knew Him, we know that Jesus has all power in heaven and on earth, all authority, and our mandate is to go and to preach the gospel. It's not to be, this is my own understanding. Of course, there comes a time when we do look at these things like we've discussed now, but our main mandate is to go and preach the gospel to the whole world because
yes,
he's the Prince of Peace, no one
yeah.
else, not governments.
That's right. It's a gospel of hope.
Yes, absolutely. So,
It's a gospel that speaks of the coming of the kingdom ultimately. And we have to hang
absolutely.
on to that. We have to hang on to that.